Hello. Lyrical analysis, baby. Lyrical analysis, baby. With Megan Thee Stallion. Hi, I'm Elliot. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time to my channel. I'm a musician and a writer, and today I am going to start a series, perhaps, maybe not, about lyrical analysis, wherein we talk about lyrics and analyze them. And it will be called lyrical analysis. So creativity is already just oozing from my pores as I do this. But in particular, I just really wanted to have a chance to highlight some of the artists that a lot of my audience really likes and that are gaining quite a bit of attention in the mainstream, in different circles, etc. And just sort of talk about them from the perspective of what they're doing lyrically in their music and what we can take from it. So there's no better place to start than an artist that I listen to quite often, Megan Thee Stallion, who is very popular these days for a number of reasons. For one, she's incredibly savvy at using social media, at talking about herself, at presenting herself in this really stark, fascinating, and beautiful way. But when it comes down to it, her most notable trait is that she is a rapper. That's her trade. And as a rapper, she's really skilled and really good at making club bangers. I think oftentimes when it comes to lyrical conversation and conversation about serious music, whether it's in hip hop or otherwise, we kind of overlook the club banger. We overlook the people who are able to make songs that people want to dance to, that people sing to, that really highlight memories of people's lives. And because we avoid these conversations about these records in serious analytical ways, I think we miss out on some of the great parts of music. And in general, we kind of force an elitist and Western-minded mindset of what makes good music and what makes deep music, hip-hop or otherwise. Like, as an aside, recently I tweeted, I was wondering why people feel like they need to talk about rap as poetry in order to exalt the lyrics of it. Like, there's a lot of white people that I noticed that are like, well, yeah, I mean, rap is so cool. It's literally poetry, and I just really enjoy the poetry of rapping. And it's like, cool, I mean, there is a certain parallel and there is a certain lineage to where rap is poetry, but I just don't understand why we had to compare rap to these Western institutions of respect that are, highlighted by people like Shakespeare and Wordsworth, and be like, Tupac is in those annals, so therefore that's why he's cool. It's just one point of analysis, and while it's cool to do that, it's a cool point of analysis. When you center it as the point through which rap becomes legitimate, you misunderstand, I think, some of the traditions of hip-hop and some of the things that make hip-hop great, as well as the fact that rap is not poetry. It's rap. It's musical, vocal performance with lyrics. And you can never really one-to-one compare rap verses to poetic verses, to poetry. They are meant to be read entirely differently. For one, the rap is meant to be rapped, and you're meant to hear the rap. You can't just read rap lyric comments on a YouTube instrumental and be like, yep, that's poetry, you did that. What really makes rap complete and what makes rap rap is the fact that it is rapped and that there's an entire element of performance attached to it that is important not only to the sound of the art form, but to the lyrics. The lyrics are written in a certain way that they're supposed to be sounded out and performed and pronounced by the performer. And that also comes with a set of values that are completely different from poetry. Rap serves many different purposes, but one of the essential purposes of rap is to really get the listener interested in the rap. So you have to connect with the audience, the listener, in a way that is compelling to them. Remember that rap sources from New York parties in the 70s, from Kool Herc, DJ Kool Herc, and his friend who came up to the stage and started rapping rhymes over the loops that he would play to sort of make the party get going. It's emceeing, really, more than anything. And I think Megan Thee Stallion is somebody who can be analyzed very interestingly as an MC, because her mentality, her approach to when she raps is not simply to write poetic lyrics, but to write lyrics that are interesting, are well written, sure, and that invoke a sense of joy and partying and excitement in the listener. It makes you want to go out. It makes you want to party because that's an important thing to do. And rap is so important to that part of ourselves. I also think we over exaggerate conversations of swagger and swag and like Asian conversations about hip hop, particularly. Oh, this person just has a certain swag. And it's 2021, so I shouldn't have to tell you why that's a little bit corny, but it's also kind of problematic to reduce everything down to swag when it comes to confidence and performance in hip hop. It's not about having a certain swagger that you can activate with certain clothes and certain enunciation styles. It's just about confidence, sure, but more so about presentation. It's about presenting the energy and the ideas that you want in the rap that you're doing, in the music that you're making. And oftentimes that energy will be, the energy of being cool, being confident, being attractive, being hardcore. But it can also be being emotional, being reflective. A lot of Drake records come to mind. So with that preamble out of the way, let's talk about what makes Megan Thee Stallion Megan Thee Stallion, and then talk about her lyrics. Part 1, her influences. So I want to talk really quickly about Megan Thee Stallion's influences. She's cited her mother as her main inspiration, who recently passed away, may she rest in peace. And her mother often played a lot of different Southern rap records for her. Now, the basis of these Southern rap records, particularly UGK, she cites Pimp C of UGK as a huge inspiration. She even does the Tina Snow personality based off of his personality, Tony Snow, which was something that he put in a lot of his lyrics. But she also would listen to 3 6 Mafia and Juicy J, sometimes Biggie, NWA. What you notice about a lot of these rappers is, first of all, they're not female rappers, because female rappers don't have to solely be inspired by female rappers, and male rappers don't solely have to be inspired by male rappers, while we're at it. But she takes inspirations from some of these legends of rap, and a lot of them have these characteristics of course, a type of bravado, a larger-than-life personality. That's something you see in Pimp C for sure. I mean, Pimp C was known for being really, filled with this unbelievable bravado and this unbelievable willingness to say what's on his mind in a way that could often be very crude and disrespectful. And he enjoyed that. Similar things can be said of Juicy J. Both of those rappers often incorporated a lot of really strong sexual imagery, like really explicit, nasty sexual imagery in their rapping. Same could even be said about Biggie, who, in addition to being this incredible lyricist and storyteller, was, again, a larger-than-life personality, willing to say a lot of things that could be very taboo, could be stigmatized, talking about violence, talking about people in very disrespectful ways. Now, what's great about these rappers and their ability to have this bravado and their ability to be larger than life and their ability to say things that can be really nasty is that it really takes us out of our day-to-day life and our social conditioning, our wiring to be a certain type of acceptable type of person, and instead glorify and look at these figures who go against the rules, go against what people think about them constantly, accept and love themselves for who they are, and are very, very much willing to say whatever the hell that they want to say, whether or not people like it. And what happens is people really, really like it because it speaks to something in ourselves. It speaks to a nature in ourselves to want to be confident, to want to be larger than life, to enjoy being around larger than life people who help us feel alive, really. There's just so much life in Pimp C's lyrics and his verses and in Biggie's verses, even though both of those guys have long since passed away. And so it's really cool to see Megan Thee Stallion incorporate her influences very clearly in her rapping, because not only are those great rappers to pay attention to, they're also rappers who, when you see them channeled, it really kind of gives you chills a little bit, because it's like, wow, like this person who is no longer in the physical realm still spiritually lives with us in the music that people like Megan Thee Stallion are making. That could also be said of her mother, who was such an influential person and was such a powerful person in her life. And I just love that you can see that in her lyrics. But let's take a look at why. Part 2, technical analysis. So when we talk about Megan Thee Stallion's lyrics, we have to talk about sort of the technicalities of it first. I won't go over this too long, but there's a couple of things I want to go over. For one, I want to go over rhyme schemes, because rhyme schemes are one of the principal tenets of what people consider great rapping. If you rhyme, that's part of rapping, basically. There's not a lot of rappers who don't rhyme very much. But additionally, rhyming is something that is such a tactile form of expression. It's so different. It's so malleable, especially in the English language. This is when we talk about things like polysyllabic rhyme schemes and internal rhyme schemes, which are things that show a lot more technical skill because they're quite difficult. They're difficult to fit into a rhyme scheme with matching the flow, and they're also very difficult to do just in general, to come up with more and more words and more syllables that rhyme with more and more words and syllables. Usually the typical rhyme scheme we think about is a one-syllable rhyme scheme, a single-syllabic rhyme scheme like I went to the car, then we drove very far type of thing. And of course, Megan Thee Stallion is a person who can go with the single-syllabic rhyme scheme to emphasize something very clearly. Go to your place, no face, no case, 99% tint in a blacked-out wraith. That's one rhyme, although it's a lot of internal rhyme schemes, which we'll talk about in a second. But that rhyme, when you hear it hit, it hits a lot harder a lot of the times because of the simplicity of it. But then again, Megan is also really tactile using polysyllabic rhyme schemes. Like, check out, I remember hoes used to clap for me happily, now I'm bossed up and these same hoes mad at me. That's a 3-syllable rhyme scheme, A-I-E. Happily clap for me. And it's also really impressive that she's able to use internal rhyme scheme with that. So to clarify, internal rhyme scheme is just when, you have end rhyme in raps. I went to the car, I got very far. But internal rhyme schemes are not only using end rhyme, but also using rhymes within the rhyme, the line itself, to further complicate and make extravagant different rhyme schemes. That's a really terrible way of describing it, but there you go. And, when she says clap for me happily, that's the sound of that is so cool, right? It just feels so rhythmic and so sharp, especially since she flows them in this very staccato way. But I think it's also really cool that she's able to do that in a way that makes a coherent thought. A lot of times people use all these different rhyme schemes, but it's just kind of boring, because you're just finding polysyllabic rhyme schemes, things that rhyme, and then putting them together in some sort of way. Whereas clap for me happily is an example of a phrase that just naturally works as a sentence. It could be a declarative sentence on its own, clap for me happily. But it's also, it's something you can work very easily into a sentence, plausibly, and yet at the same time, it rhymes so perfectly. So I think all throughout Thought Shit, she just demonstrates this really strong ability to use rhyme schemes, and also this really strong ability to blend rhyme schemes with these really different, intricate flow switch-ups. So she goes from this line, pussy like crack when I hit it like dope, got a real hot box, but it don't smoke. And then she switches to a flow, hot girl, but I'm still the coldest. Hey, I'm the big homie, but I ain't the oldest. Bitch dry hating, trying to get noticed. Man, ain't nobody come to see you, Otis. Look. And that's, of course, a reference to the Temptations and that whole scene where, David Ruffin is yelling at Otis Williams. You have a lot of club rappers that make really great club hits and don't have to do complicated and intricate things with their rhyming. But Megan Thee Stallion is not that guy, pal. Not that guy. Megan Thee Stallion will give you all these different types of fun, not super over the top complicated, but still kind of complicated rapping technical skills, and then put them into a format with these hard beats that is still fun to listen to at the club, and you don't get distracted by the rapping. That's a really difficult thing to balance, because a lot of rappers who want to focus on their lyricism and their intricate technical ability will not really pay too much attention to making people move, because they want you to focus their attention on how good they are at rapping. And that's not necessarily fun to listen to at a party. These are the kinds of things that Biggie was incredibly good at, and so it's really interesting to see how Megan takes that inspiration as well and uses these different flow switch ups and rhyme schemes that are typically associated with more lyrical hip hop and put them into this format that people still want to dance to, make memorable records. That's where that influence comes in from. Additionally, when you see her talk about her sexuality and her body and sex in general, and talk about just putting herself in a position as a boss, as this person who is unflappable, untouchable, who will fuck you up, who will have a lot of sex, it very much echoes Tony Snow. It echoes Pimp C and that major influence in her life. But it's so interesting because it also comes from the perspective of a black woman, which makes it politically a lot more engaging in a way. Of course, these are not political records, but everything has a politics to it. All art has a politics to it. And I think especially when you see the influences and you see her new age interpretation of them, they seem to be centered, interestingly, on how our society has changed and what values we're looking at now and what kind of politics that encumbers. So let's conclude with a little bit of context. Briefly, I want to go over what womanism is, because I think that whether or not you consider Megan Thee Stallion and her type of art as fitting a womanist tradition and as befitting womanist values, I think ultimately that is part of the lineage and part of the influence that not only makes Megan Thee Stallion, make her choices as someone who's empowering herself as a black woman, but also makes a lot of people a little bit more intrigued by her. It makes people feel more compelled by what she's doing as an artist. I think womanism is one of the key tenets of social theory, a key form of social theory and gender ideology that people need to reflect on right now, and that a lot of people, in reflecting on, look through as a lens to find Megan Thee Stallion more interesting. Womanist theory basically says, and we're looking at Wikipedia, judge me if you will, that one's femininity cannot be stripped from the culture within which it exists. Now, womanism comes from a long tradition of response, in a sense, to feminism in the West being primarily focused on white women, and in fact having a very racist history. In the early days of feminist movements, black women were not only not centered, but not incorporated at all, shunned from feminist movements because black women were not seen as women and were not seen as fitting these feminist ideologies that supposedly stood for equality between men and women. The second wave of feminist ideology changes in a sense because it incorporates black women and sort of tries to shatter that discrimination inherent in feminist ideology and feminist circles, but does not really do much to change the actual reality of separation and segregation within feminism, even though it incorporates black people more. The third wave talks about something we call intersectionality, which is really trying to look at feminism and then look at these different contexts of culture, race within them that make us different, that make women different, that make women's contexts different, and then trying to create a support that is unilateral across all of those things and takes into account all of those things. But womanism is different from that because womanism centers on how culture is inextricable from womanhood and femininity. Rather than look at things solely from a lens of trying to examine masculinity versus femininity and examine what femininity means, what womanhood means, etc., etc., womanism is interested in interrogating and talking about and championing what black womanhood means and what is best for black womanhood. And tells you basically that there is no feminism separate from race, that the cultural context in which we live have very much to do with the kind of gender-based discrimination and gender-based empowerment, quote unquote, that we undergo. Now, womanism is also something that has had a lot of different definitions, a lot of different scholarship, and I'm not exactly the kind of person that is best to talk about it. Not only because I'm not a black woman, but also because my reading level, not great. But I really thought it was important to bring up womanism as part of the context and part of perhaps the DNA of Megan Thee Stallion's lyricism. Again, whether or not you consider her rapping, her art, to be a part of that lineage. Alice Walker is the person who first coined womanism, coming from the sort of shared experience of black mothers calling their daughters too womanish, or acting womanish. And Alice Walker's original quotes and thoughts that she wrote about womanism say the following about it. A black feminist or feminist of color. From the black folk expression of mothers to female children, you acting womanish like a woman. usually referring to outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful behavior, wanting to know more and in greater depth than is considered good for one, interesting in grown-up doings, acting grown-up, being grown-up, interchangeable with another black folk expression, you trying to be grown, responsible, in charge, serious. 2. A woman who loves other women sexually and or non-sexually, appreciates and prefers women's culture, women's emotional flexibility, values tears as a natural counterbalance of laughter, and women's strength. Sometimes loves individual men sexually and or non-sexually, committed to survival and wholeness of entire people, male and female, not a separatist except periodically for health, traditionally universalist. 3. Loves music, loves dance, loves the moon, loves the spirit, loves love and food and roundness, loves struggle, loves the folk, loves herself, regardless. 4. Womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. So I think when we look at Megan Thee Stallion's storytelling and who she is, what she communicates about herself in her music, you can see certain connections with these tenets. I think a lot of Megan Thee Stallion's rapping and what she does in her music videos, what she does on social media, can be considered in the lens of outrageous, audacious, courageous, or willful behavior. Now, she is a grown woman by the law and by our societal understanding as someone in her mid-20s, but I also think that she is a young woman who projects a lot of maturity that perhaps folks beyond her age don't even have, because she has an understanding of things that are larger than her. You can see that in how she speaks about, for instance, her situation wherein she was shot by Tory Lanez, and talks about women in general. Responsible, in charge, serious, again, like those are terms that I think Megan Thee Stallion would very much consider part of what she does. I also think that in part because she has said that she's attracted to women, and also because of how she champions women inside and outside of her art, trying to, empower, trying to exalt women, trying to exalt women's bodies and women's mentalities, women's minds, their spirits. Megan Thee Stallion could also be fitting under that second tenet of a woman who loves other women sexually and or non-sexually, and she sometimes loves individual men. She talks about loving men, about being with men a lot sexually and or non-sexually, and of course loves music, loves dance, loves love and food and roundness, struggle, loves the folk, loves herself regardless. Like, again, I think that these are tenets that Megan Thee Stallion would probably consider part of who she is and what she does in her art. So with that said, we've talked about the 1970s parties briefly that sort of birthed hip-hop, and how MCing is a form of getting the party going, and that's how it started, and that's still a part of rap in a major way. But we've also talked about different lyrical forms, technical analysis of rhyme schemes and flows, and different influences that were key to why Megan Thee Stallion raps the way she raps, as well as potential influences with the context of womanism. We talked briefly about brief sort of simple definitions of womanism that can be, even though many people will have different definitions, incorporated into Megan Thee Stallion's philosophy and her art. Therefore, I don't really want to hear people talk about Megan Thee Stallion in a diminutive way, as if she is somebody who is clueless or is somebody whose value is not in any type of depth. Sure, I think critical analysis of anybody, whether it's somebody who's deep or somebody who's not deep, is very important. And I'm sure many people will have different forms of opinions, well thought out opinions, some not well thought out opinions about Megan Thee Stallion and her art. But ultimately, yes, of course, it is art. If you make a thing, it is art. And Megan Thee Stallion's art comes from not only just traditions of exploitation and trying to make money off of people, but it also comes from traditions of empowerment and traditions of connecting with people. And that's why I think she's one of the most important artists of our generation, as many people would concur. That's why I think it's really cool that she's getting these accolades right now, because she represents a sort of new tradition and a new perspective on what hip-hop can be used for, and how to blend different forms of hip-hop to create something that really meshes societally and politically with where we are now. But this is all very brief and very surface level stuff, and I'm probably not telling you anything new. But if I am, or if you found any of the content interesting, feel free to hit the like button and comment. Subscribe even. Hit the bell. Screw it. And if you're interested in further lyrical analysis videos, let me know. Let me know any artists that you're interested in, etc. Also, if you have any thoughts that you want to share about Megan Thee Stallion and her music, or about womanism, do feel free to leave a comment. I'm interested in learning. I'm not interested in yelling at people or getting into banter. Well, banter is kind of fun, but yeah. I'm Elliot. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.